tuned in to this week's episode of Tribal Research Specialists, the podcast. A podcast about tribal people, our communities, and discussions on research traditions. We aim to uncover the true meaning of research methodological approaches that are currently operating in tribal life, with implications for tribal communities and avenues for knowledge production. Recorded in 1967, maybe, but it was the Fort Kipp Singers. You know the Fort Kipp Singers, right? Yeah, a little bit. I mean,
I do. Yes,
they're legendary.
I do know the Fort Kipp.
No, yeah,
Fort Kipp legend.
They're legendary.
Classic.
A lot of the songs still circulating around there, but very distinct style that was really became very popular. I think really high singing.
If Fort Kipp Singers were an 80s classic rock group, who would they be?
Oh boy. An 80s one? 80s?
Yeah, it has to be 80s, man.
I'm not I don't know if there's maybe that, yeah. I'd say they're closer, if you go back a generation or a decade, like the Bee Gees, you know?
Well, then it's not funny anymore.
Oh, I get it. We're trying to be funny. I thought we were trying to be technical.
We're trying to be funny. No,
well, if you look at the pentameter of the beat, it's largely like the pentatonic scale does classify it.
All right, go ahead, keep talking.
Yeah, Fort Kipp Singers. Yeah, I mean, people know them. They were of acclaim even today. I mean, you got to get some black market albums of them, I think.
Hey, where were they from?
Fort Kipp.
I mean, we're just assuming people know this, man. You gotta.
Yeah,
we gotta
I don't know where that is.
You don't know where that is. Tell us about Fort Kipp, there, partner.
I don't know anything about Fort Kipp other than Fort Kipp Singers.
Well, Fort Kipp is isn't it part of the God darn, I can't even think of the reservation there now. What is the one way up in the north there? Northeast Montana. I can't
it's
think
like
of it.
Fort Peck, right?
Oh yeah, Fort Peck.
It's like Fort Peck.
Yeah.
Right?
Fort Peck.
Yeah.
Yes. Fort Kipp.
But Fort Kipp was really a fort outside of Fort Peck Reservation.
Yeah.
Or was it in the middle of the reservation?
I think it is on. It's like in the lower right-hand corner, Fort Kipp. Yeah. So the Assiniboine.
But they were like mostly Assiniboine and Sioux singers.
Correct. Yeah.
But Fort Kipp was part of that. I think they were kind of part of that classic movement of powwow singers, Mandaree, Eagle Whistle, Blackfoot Crossing, Old Agency, Big Corner Post, or Big Corner, not Big, Big Corner, Haystack.
You can put the post on there.
You can put the
proper.
Post. Well, I don't
proper.
know. I mean,
depends on how old you are.
I didn't know if we were doing long form. I mean, I didn't know
if you're in your 30s, you don't put the post on. If you're in your 20s, don't even mention it.
Yeah. You don't even say singers anymore.
No. Yeah.
See, back in the day, you would say Mandaree singers.
Yeah. That dropped.
You don't even do that now.
No. You'll age yourself right away.
Yeah, you'll age yourself.
Yeah.
Or if you say you tape them. I taped them.
Yeah, even if you didn't, if you put it on your digital recorder, yeah.
Even if it's on your phone and you still refer to it as taping.
Cripes. Yeah. Anyway, so we got a guest today who I've known for a number of years.
And who is not from Fort Kipp.
Who is not. let's emphasize, not from Fort Kipp. In fact, he's from quite a distance away and has a very unique perspective that I became very interested in. And
he's closer to Fort Pitt.
Fort Pitt? What? Where's that at?
It's closer. I said it's closer.
Oh, we don't really know where it's at, but we know it's closer.
It's on the Ohio River. It's the confluence of the Ohio River. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
it's the outbreak of smallpox happened at Fort Pitt, not Fort Pip.
What?
Fort Pip is different.
Is it Pitt or Pip?
Pitt, like Pitt. Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. All right.
Yeah.
So, he's an acclaimed scholar. I'm going to give him that title. Don't necessarily know what that means, but isn't that what everybody says? Like the MC, when they're talking about somebody, they don't even know them. There's a champion dancer in their own right, and you don't even know them. Won many a contest, and they'd have no idea.
He's well known. Yeah. he's well known in Indian country. Yeah. And his efforts championing the rights of Indigenous people.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean anything. Like you could add anything to that.
You could. So we're gonna go MC powwow MC style. We've got Ryan, Dr. Emanuel. Is it Emanuel? Emanuel. How do you say?
I say Emanuel.
Emanuel. Okay. And
so unlike our Hebrew brethren who would say Emmanuel, you just say Emmanuel.
I do, and I think it just might be my southern enunciation.
I believe
Emanuel. It's an Emanuel. It's electronic.
It is a surname that we trace to the time that my family started speaking English.
Really?
So there's that. Yeah, that name has some historicity associated with it.
Holy cow! Now
historicity.
That
ironically, that was the name of my first hip hop album.
Historicity.
Historicity.
Yeah. Now Ryan comes from way across the continent. When I think about this area, I think, man, these guys, these tribes over here were the ones who were at the interface of a lot of the things that us Rocky Mountain tribes are dealing with or have dealt with more recently. So they have a long history of interactions with I don't know, what do we call them now? Immigrants,
white folk,
settlers, white folk. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of it.
We just say white folk.
Okay, yeah, all right, we'll do that. A long history of interactions with them, and I became really interested in his perspective and their own his own tribal pursuit of understanding of their history. And I thought, man, this is a good opportunity to have Ryan join us and have a little chat about some things that we've been back and forthing a little bit through email, not Emanuel, email.
Oh,
no. I tried. I got an Emanuel for my new webcam. And okay, all right. So
I'm excited because Shondine kind of like told me a little bit about what you guys kind of been chatting about. So
yeah,
I say we just get right in.
Let's do it. So
we should skip right in.
Let us. So preface this, Ryan, with I mean, what's the interest in particular that we've been talking about? Give us a little context.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, you and I started an email thread about the process of governments making tribes, right. Basically taking people who may or may not have been historic allies or enemies for that matter,
right,
and putting them together either deliberately in the case of making reservations, or sort of indirectly, which is that's the context that I come from. So people who are fleeing the first wave of colonization, kind of end up in these marginal lands in the Southeast. Marginal from the perspective of the settlers and the colonists.
Right.
And so regardless of the way that these peoples come together, they have a way of creating new identities that are they're still indigenous identities, but they bear that mark of colonialism, that you've kind of been shoved together in some way, and you have to kind of make a new identity sort of in the midst of this sea of colonialism all around you.
Right. So what's interesting about that, or I mean, I guess a couple things that just to demystify or to help me to understand. So when these tribes in your area kind of band together or got forced together, however that happened, how unique or how separate were your cultural pursuits, or were they fairly similar? I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah. So I'll preface this by saying, one, I'm not a real historian.
What? What? Two, what? I thought we're having a historian on today. We got the wrong person. So, no, I'm just kidding.
I think we just log off.
Click.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. Okay, keep going.
So I'm not a real historian, right. But also this happened more than 300 years ago.
Okay.
Right. And we've lost a tremendous amount of knowledge in that time.
Yeah.
What we do know is that these were all people who were of the Eastern Woodlands cultures. They came from three very different linguistic groups. Our ancestors are made up of people who spoke Siouan languages like the Chiral and the Ph.D.
Okay.
People who spoke Iroquoian languages, the Tuscarora.
Oh, right.
And a group of people along the very coastal margin of the Carolinas, who are usually called the Carolina Algonquians.
Okay.
These were the Hatteras, Roanoke. They didn't identify as tribes at that time. At the time of contact, they lived in towns.
Okay.
So these were independent towns, and they don't really fit the model of the stereotypical tribe.
Right.
But these were all people who encountered these waves of colonialism that started in the 1500s.
Wow.
So like North Carolina was invaded pretty early on.
Wow.
A lot of people don't sort of think about it as an invasion, but it was.
Yeah, essentially.
There were massive epidemics that swept through the region in the late 1500s and killed off a large fraction of the native population in that region. And by the early 1700s, there was all-out war between the remnants of those native nations who lived in the eastern half of what's now North Carolina, and the colonial powers in North and South Carolina. And so those events, war, disease, and also exploitation through fur trade and dependency on sort of these trading posts, just really shattered Native society in the eastern half of what is today North Carolina. And so, people went where they needed to go to survive, and these tended to be sort of the margins of their tribal territories. And one of those places is what is now Robeson County, a home of the Lumbee people.
And that's what you guys call yourselves today, Lumbee.
Yeah. So Lumbee is a geographic place name.
Oh, okay.
That is. That's what we understand to be our ancestral name for the river where we live, and where we have spent 300 years sort of building a new identity as a tribal nation.
Yeah. Holy cow. 1500s. The 1500s. What was the Crows up to in 1500, Aaron?
Oh man. Well, nobody spoke English.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they say the first Crow Indian that could speak English was in like the 1880s.
1880s.
The late 1870s.
Now, some of the earlier languages weren't French. It was English first, is what you're saying.
When I say English, I just mean white people.
Okay. All right. We got another non-historian here.
So it could be like German.
Okay.
It could be
learned another language. Yeah.
Yeah, non-Crow. Well, maybe there was probably some Crows that were probably knew enough in French and enough in English, but in the 1500s, I think we were largely untouched.
That was pre-horse. Here in this area.
Yeah, in our region, pre-horse.
We're still wandering around on foot.
Wandering. Just out there, just pillaging. Man, it's hard to say because
around.
One of our migrations to the west happened right around 1500.
That's what I was wondering. So, where would you place it roughly? Just estimate the end of it, or the beginning of it, or transitionary.
It sounds like they place it right in the middle of the 1500s, but I don't know how that number is ever determined. If it's like, because if it's archaeological, that makes things kind of hard because it's hard to identify. Other than pottery, it's very hard to identify like that's a Crow artifact versus a Sioux artifact, whatever, Pottery, there's two types of major potteries in the West, which is Shoshone, and then the other category is Crow Hidatsa. So
wow.
And I know linguistics has some methods of dating language and things, but I'm not real like good at that part. I mean, linguistics is like it can get pretty down and dirty, like how they're able to determine age and language and archaic languages versus like modernized language. And so I know they do some of that. So there's kind of been this determination of like mid 1500s as one migration.
Interesting. Yeah, that kind of blows my mind, the first contact, or where the major disruption started to happen over in your guys' territory there, Ryan, was 1500s. That just blows my mind, because at least I do, I think of these times as very very, very far in the distant past. It is in a way, but I comprehend it as like this exemplar, this time of where things were fairly undisturbed from other.
I think for us in the West, it was. I mean, for the most part, there was proto effects of colonization, but I don't think we were fully aware of that.
Yeah.
But I do think the Midwest for sure was feeling the effects of what was happening in the East. But for the most part, on the Missouri River, I mean, we were still kind of doing our thing.
Yeah.
At least I'd like to think so. I mean, I'm sure down to the minute you can make arguments, but so we're talking like South Carolina,
North Carolina today.
North Carolina,
right? It's right on the South Carolina border. But we had Elizabethans running around the coastal parts of these territories back then. And there's a well documented trip by two coastal Algonquian men to London in the 1580s, like during Shakespeare times.
Wow.
They spent about a year in London working with this guy who was sort of they didn't call them scientists back then. I think they were natural philosophers.
Yeah.
He had come to the coast of present day North Carolina with this first group of would-be colonizers. He actually took pretty good notes, and people are pretty grateful for all of his documentation. And while he was in London with these guys, they taught each other their languages, and he helped to create a written version of their Algonquian dialect.
Wow.
Unfortunately, almost all of that material was lost in the Great Fire of London. But there are some scraps that survive, and I've seen photocopies of some of these where one of the Algonquian men, Manteo, is like scribbling in the corner of this parchment in the script that they created for their own language, and it translates to "King Manteo was here."
Some early graffiti.
Yeah. So like all of these like super weird interactions, and it was a really long time ago. You've got Shakespeare and Elizabeth and all this stuff happening in England, but they're kind of bleeding over military expeditions and colonists into the territories of these coastal native communities. They're looking for gold and gems, and they're kind of setting off these waves of disease and just really disrupting. Even before they physically arrive, they're already starting to disrupt native society along the eastern seaboard.
Wow, it kind of makes me feel like you guys are kind of like vampires for some reason. I don't know why. What's that show with Tom Cruise and the vampires? Like you guys are vampires.
Vampires.
You guys are vampires. I mean, you guys seen the beginning of it. Well, I mean, your guys.
And what's messed up is like, at least in the last 100 years, I think natives in the West could have learned something from observing what was happening, what had happened out there. But it seemed like we were kind of in denial, especially in the last 50 years, in denial that our situation was a little different. But I mean, maybe it was, but the outcome was largely the same.
Yeah.
And we refused to look at other tribes to say, hey, what happened with them, or how did they were able to still maintain some remnants of who they were. I'm not sure if we in Montana can survive with any culture left after 400 years or 500 years. You know what I mean? Because we've really only been dealing with it for 150 years.
Yeah.
And we're pitiful.
Yeah.
And so, man, I add another 100 years to that.
Yeah.
Then another 100 years. Like what?
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, it's commendable, man.
It is.
To be able to say like a tribe can even say their own name.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that was
wild.
That was my thought exactly when we were chatting about this. I think it was over in one of those. I think it was that Vine Deloria Symposium. We were chatting briefly, and I got to thinking.
For the record,
what?
That sounds really boring.
Hey.
Oh my God! Like you said, we were chatting at the Vine Deloria
over a crumpet.
Symposium. I was like, you know what's crazy is I never thought hearing the name Vine Deloria
and Symposium.
It sounded like the whitest statement I've ever heard in my life. He's like the Godfather, and it's like, God bless. Never thought.
This symposium, is unlike any other that I've attended. So anyway, well, we can talk about that later. But we were chatting. Side note.
I only hear white people talk about Vine Deloria. I'm just throwing it out there.
That and Black Elk Speaks, right?
Yeah, I've heard some Indians.
Okay, good. All right. Just testing the water there.
Well, Vine Deloria, I've never heard an Indian, like I've never heard like a reser just like quote Vine Deloria.
Hey, did you read that Vine Deloria book?
When I was up all night. Why? God, I was reading the Vine Deloria book, man. Oh yeah, me too, bro. I can't wait till I'm done with the Scott Mamaday book. I'm gonna pick up some Vine Deloria.
He's a very quotable guy.
just not on the res, I guess, right? Okay, let me get
Vine
back.
Deloria.
Let me get back.
Scott Mamaday.
Both.
Deloria.
No, I agree.
Mama Day too.
I agree. I 100% agree. I'm just saying, you got to admit the statement.
He's just clowning.
We were discussing this at a Vine Deloria Symposium. Is a very white statement. We can agree, can't we? Can we agree?
That's going to be the title of this episode. We were discussing this at the Vine Deloria Symposium. Or our interview with the vampire. Which one?
All right, we're getting off track, and that was my fault. But I want the record to reflect.
Yeah. Point those things out because,
yeah, no, I'm gonna, man.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Anyway, I was remarking on the same thing you remarked on, and it perked my ears. Is that okay? Is that res enough for you? Perked?
No, I'm not saying that.
No, I'm just kidding. No,
you shared a common interest.
We did, and my thought was this: we should look at these eastern tribes, us in the west or in the middle part of this country, and use that as a benchmark for what could happen, or what we may need to do to hang on or reverse the clock. Because I mean, just that statement alone that Ryan said in the 1500s is when this all started. Now, is that when it started? Is that when you guys first kind of had contact, or is that kind of where things were at its maximum of destruction?
No, I would say like 14. You were right after
the Mayflower, or is it?
Yeah.
No,
the Mayflower.
No. Okay. I don't know. Just get some timeline. Go ahead.
The Spanish marched a military expedition through the entire Southeast in the mid 1500s. They came all the way up into North Carolina. The Cherokees documented these conquistadors marching through the mountains.
Yeah.
I don't remember what decade of the 1500s, but so they came before the Elizabethans, but they didn't stay. They might have put up I think they built like a military outpost, but they didn't have the footprint of the English.
Right.
So early 1500s, there's non-native people there. That's what we're saying, absolutely. Regardless of who. Yeah. Wow, man. Wow.
That's wild. That is wild.
That blows my mind. Like, I feel like a tourist right now.
I know. Me too. I'm like really staring at
like
Ryan,
I really do. Like I'm just like trying to fathom, like, because my focus has been so much the Rocky Mountains, and especially the Northern Rockies. And I'm just like, I'm not. Can you guys see my eyes?
I can see them. Yeah, they're very tight.
That's how I am. That's how I feel. Damn, dude. 14, 15, 15s, man.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Really interesting, and that's why I think the perspective of Ryan here as a scholar in Western academics, and he says he's not a historian. I don't know what that means, but I mean, he knows a lot more than I know about his area, which should be true.
We'll never have a historian on the podcast.
No, we can't.
That's not.
I think it was one of our stipulations. We just said no.
Yeah,
we said no.
If you're next to your name is historian,
you're out.
Not coming on.
You're out. Yeah. So this is the interesting thing that you were mentioning, because it is kind of a common thing that happened with tribes, and it kind of perpetuates a little bit of, or it breaks or perpetuates some stereotypes. This idea of tribes banding together to survive these waves of newcomers, to put it nicely, I guess. But one of the things that you're interested in, Ryan, is this idea of I don't know if I imposed this idea, inserted it into your conversation, but this idea of traditional enemies, right? So that idea of the traditional enemy, was imposed upon me by my folks, by my community. They said, "Oh yeah, those guys up there, those are your traditional enemies." And as I grown into a person who thinks for myself, I guess, an adult, you come to find out that that's not necessarily true for the most part. Sure, wars and alliances came and went, but to have traditional enemies, like people you just always hate? That seems like a very Western concept that came in later, and why that attached onto us and our thinking and thoughts, I don't know. But I'm not sure if that's what you said earlier after all of our banter, how that plays into what you were chatting about.
No, but I really appreciated in your earlier correspondence when you brought that up, because you also introduced this idea that that alliances and oppositions are temporary, and people adapt to whatever they're facing at that time or in that generation.
Right.
And it made me reflect back on the things that happened to my ancestors, and it is kind of strange when people say, well, it doesn't sound very plausible that that folks who spoke an Algonquian language would band together with folks who spoke a Siouan language,
right.
In these same swamps.
Right.
And you're like, well, they were both facing people who spoke not only spoke a radically different language, but also had very different values about what was going to happen to their land,
right?
In the next few years.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that becomes I think the more important thing is this idea of alliances. Yeah, so there's been some treaties and some brief treaties among our tribes that have lasted, only a few minutes. And there's some that have lasted, a decade or so. So it's a very fluid concept, and the idea, and I think we've talked about this before, about the idea of, embracing that a tribe is always going to be your enemy no matter what. I think is doesn't align with our own oral histories, and why that became so prominent, I don't know. So I'm interested in this name, the Lumbee. It's a geographic name, you said. And so what tribal groups fall under that? Because I'm not aware.
So I will give you my understanding.
Okay.
And if you ask 10 different Lumbees, you might get 6 different. You won't get 10. You might get 6 different answers.
Okay. Yeah.
So the origin of this name is historically contested.
Right.
There are some who say that Lumbee is the original ancestral name of the river, and the ee suffix, that e sound, is common on a lot of the rivers in our region. And the linguists say that belongs to the Siouan language families. So all of these rivers in the southeast that have the e sound on the end, those were rivers named by Siouan speaking peoples in the southeast. And so people say this is the ancestral name of the river. Some people take it a step farther and say that we remember that this translation is dark water, and we're people of the dark water. And that goes back to the fact that our river and all the rivers in this region are blackwater streams. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that.
Because of the carbon,
phenomenon.
All the carbon in the water, right? From the swamps, etc.
Exactly. They have their headwaters in swamps and wetlands. They don't come out of the mountains, so they are full of dissolved organic material.
Yeah.
And the water looks like tea. It's a really beautiful color. Yeah. And so people say this translates to people of the dark water. I don't know if that's, yeah. I'll say that's contested, because right. There are also people who say that the name of this river is Lumber River, like the wood, because the state of North Carolina declared that was the name of the river in the year 1809.
Huh.
And they said, "Oh, you're just mishearing it and trying to make it sound Indian." So there are Lumbee people that say, no, the North Carolinians misheard it and called it lumber. But this is contested.
Right.
It was also called Drowning Creek by colonists.
Huh.
Not sure the origins of that.
Yeah.
So
that term either.
That's how you find it, is Lumber River, huh?
Yeah, if you look at geographic place names in Apple Maps or Google Maps, you will look for the Lumber River.
The Lumber River, yeah, I just did that.
So that's go ahead.
There's a town called Lumberton.
Yeah, that's the county seat.
Lumberton.
And the town is named after the settler name for the river.
Right. Very interesting.
Where do you live? Where, like,
what's your address?
Yeah, we want to know your address. I'm looking on the Googler.
I live in Raleigh now, up in the state capital. Whoa. I'm 2 hours north.
Hoity-toity, Vine Deloria.
So my parents both grew up close to the river. My dad grew up in a Lumbee community called Saddle Tree that's north of Lumberton.
Saddle Tree, that's cool.
Yeah.
So it's named that Saddle Tree Swamp is one of the tributaries of the Lumbee River. Yeah. And a lot of the Lumbee communities are named after the swamps that they sit near.
I see.
My mom grew up outside of Pembroke, which is a small town upriver from Lumberton, and that's the site of the university that our ancestors founded in the 1880s.
What? Your ancestors founded the university? Really?
Yep. We got $500 from the state of North Carolina in the 1880s to create a teacher training school.
That was the first tribal college.
It wasn't, so it doesn't fall into the tribal college world.
Right.
It was eventually absorbed into the University of North Carolina system.
Right.
So the closest thing I know to that school, which today is called UNC Pembroke, is Northeastern State University in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Has sort of a similar history of its founding and then getting absorbed into the state university system.
Yeah. There's another.
Founded by our ancestors in the 1880s.
That is crazy. There's a number of colleges over there in the East, I think, that were created to educate Indians, right? And then were eventually converted over, I guess, or what have you. I just got to thinking something when you were chatting. We have markers here. We kind of think about like the introduction of the gun. Kind of know when that was. Introduction of the horse, kind of have a good idea when that is. And then, like the coming of some religious sect, like the Black Robes or whatever. And then the different waves of disease.
The Seventh-day Adventists.
The Seventh-day Adventists, whichever wave came to your neck of the woods.
The Sixth-day Adventists.
What are some of the key markers in time for you guys? I'm really curious.
That is interesting to think about. So after the disease epidemics and the war that I mentioned,
what was that date again? Just roughly, don't have to be exact, but around.
early 1700s was the major war in the region. It's usually called the Tuscarora War.
Yeah.
But there were other peoples involved besides the Tuscarora Nation.
So what's the date you guys place contact at? Is there a date that you're in your region for contact?
There's not a single date. Starting in 1584, if you skip the Spaniards and go straight to the English, that would be 1584.
Oh,
wow. The Carolina colonies were declared separate colonies in the 1600s. And there was a steady trickle of colonists into North Carolina during the 1600s.
Yeah.
Our barrier islands kept a lot of the people away because North Carolina doesn't have good natural harbors like the Chesapeake Bay or like Charleston. So the Chesapeake Bay and Charleston to the north and the south were the epicenters of colonial expansion after that failed attempt with the Elizabethans in the 1500s. Because they were trying to sail their ships through these tiny little inlets.
So are you talking like what they call like the outer rim?
Outer banks.
Outer banks.
Yeah. Those are our barrier islands. And they protected native peoples during the 1600s, but you got this trickle of fur traders, land speculators, and others coming in from the north and south throughout the 1600s. All that came to a head with this war in the early 1700s, 1712, 1715.
Wow.
Yeah. So our people were living on the Lumbee River by the mid 1700s.
Okay.
I told you that my Emanuel name comes from when my family started speaking English.
Yeah.
So our first ancestors who spoke English lived on one of these coastal rivers, the Roanoke River, in the early 1700s. All we know about that name is that the name Manuel, not with an E, the name Manuel was associated with a settler who lived nearby. And I think it's fairly common for people to kind of adopt the names of English speaking people.
Yeah.
When they start speaking English, but they, with many other families, sort of migrated through the remnants of their old territory and ended up 150 miles south in the swamps of the Lumbee River eventually. Wow. And along the way, one of my ancestors decided to add the E to the beginning of our name.
Make it sound cooler. So, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of those things were pretty arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like just the name, like just up until recent, like there's even stories of people during World War II. Like there's a story of a guy, he's either Mandan or Hidatsa, where a guy saved him either at D-Day or Battle of the Bulge, and then he just took the guy's last name.
Oh, wow.
He just and it was like a non-Indian last name,
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And I don't know our oral history doesn't include the circumstances by which our ancestor took this person's name. I don't know if there was some family relationship, or if something happened that inspired them to just say, I want that name. We don't know.
Yeah. And the truth is too, they didn't need a reason.
Yeah.
It was just as foreign to probably have the last name Manuel versus the E or no E. So it's not something they're married to, necessarily.
Right.
So they kind of like, wow, it kind of sounds cool, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they met somebody who had the Manuel last name, or was like, we want to be different than them, or maybe they owed someone money.
Yeah, it could have been.
I have a question though before we get going, because we're getting way too serious for me to want to do this. Can you do the accent of the Outer Banks? People from the outer.
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. It's called the hoitoid.
Yeah.
What?
Dude,
I can't really do it though.
It is bizarre, man.
What is this? What is
It's like this. Well, can you explain it?
What is it?
It's I think the linguists call it a brogue.
Mm-hmm. A brogue.
So to me it sounds like vaguely
he almost did
Scottish.
He almost did it. He's got it.
It's distinct. It's very regionally distinct.
Hoity-toity? Is that what you said?
Accent. Yeah.
What did you call it?
It's weird.
You got it.
Dude, it's weird, man.
Well, what does it sound like, Aaron? Give us an example.
I can't even do it, but like the way he said high tide, hoi toy. Like it's this weird like Southern Irish thing.
Yeah.
Like a Southern accent and an Irish accent. Like I don't think it's as popular as it used to be, but from what I understand just from linguistics, when you're geographically isolated, your language or your speech pattern becomes an isolate. So what happened is you got these people who their entire livelihood is fishing off the Outer Banks, and they just kind of isolated themselves on the Outer Banks. So whatever, they were time stamped to a particular time. So to whatever this could be, the 1600s, 1700s, whatever it is. And it's this combination of like an Irish brogue and a Southern accent with an English thing going with it. It's weird, man.
That is.
Well, you know, my people have a distinct accent as well. If you grew up in Robeson County, I did not, so I don't have it. But I can go anywhere and I can hear a Lumbee person who grew up in Robeson County. Anywhere I go, if I hear somebody talking, I can say, "Oh, that's a Lumbee."
Bizarre,
and it's happened to me like in like Florida or out west. It's bizarre and out of place, but it happens often in North Carolina. I can always hear it and pick up when I'm hearing another Lumbee voice.
How many people speak that language? Or what's the language family? Like, what's it called?
What?
Lumbee?
Yeah, we don't speak any of our ancestral languages from any of those three linguistic groups. There are people who are trying to recover those from neighboring tribes who are who have their own.
So what's the closest living? What's the closest?
The Catawba language is a close neighbor to the Chiral branch of people, the Siouan speaking people who are part of the Lumbee tribe. So that is one of them. And I know that Catawba people have spent decades trying to revitalize their language. They were down to like a handful of speakers at one point.
Is there remnants of your language?
That there are weird words peppered here and there, and I've heard people try to like twist them and make analogies to other living native languages.
I see.
I don't know how rigorous those comparisons are.
Yeah.
Just sort of little words and mannerisms and tics that people have in their speech. I've definitely have heard people say, "Oh, well, this is related to this word that we can document."
Yeah.
So with the language, is that kind of a mirror to like the original belief system too? So is that pretty much gone as well, or? Yeah,
Lumbee people adopted Protestant Christianity probably in the mid-late 1700s. So that's I think when you lose language, there's a whole cascade of cultural loss that comes along with it. So when you were talking about sort of East Coast tribes being what's the word I'm searching for?
I'm not going to say it.
A marker or a warning.
I'm not falling
for a warning. Yeah.
To people in the Rocky Mountains, like losing your language sets off a chain reaction of cultural loss, and you could spend generations trying to eke back.
Well, and that's what it is. It's like minute. Your growth, for the amount of culture lost, the preservation effort can't match it. Like it can't. It's mathematically impossible. The amount of effort people put in is minute in comparison to what's lost. So we're always kind of like throwing rocks into the ocean is what it seems like.
Yeah.
Of course you can't. I mean, you don't want to voice that too much because like it's real defeatist,
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah. And I don't think I could have this conversation with just anyone, right? I feel like we're in good company where we can talk about these things and be real and know that I'm not being defeatist. I'm being realistic. And sort of I'm grappling with like how does my tribe and how do all these other tribes in the region, who have some of these same issues with this long legacy of colonialism. How do we deal with that?
Well, and then I noticed too, that becomes the fight. That the fight becomes the culture of that people. So where the religious or the linguistic, the language, song, dance dies out, it's replaced immediately with something. And it's typically activism or this political fight. And then that becomes the identity of a people, which is good and is beneficial. But I also think that where those efforts could be made for culture and for language, you can say, well, we've been fighting for recognition for whatever, or we've been fighting for this. And it's like, wow, you should have like appropriated some effort towards these other things while you had the chance.
Yeah, that's
what I'm saying?
Point. I do. Okay. And one of the problems is that I think people recognize that this is a multi-front fight. And you need efforts in all these areas, but you're often forced into like picking where to put your limited resources. And oftentimes it's sort of in the activism and the recognition fight, and some of these other things that are terribly important kind of fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
I've seen a trend in Indian country across the board that we're slowly replacing our identity with activism, which is good. Activism is not a bad thing, but I always make this comparison with tribes in the 70s, in the 60s, when they were fighting for native rights. They were one generation removed from culture and identity, if some of them were even connected closely to culture and identity. So the need for activism for them was like immediate, right? They understood, they were founded, culturally grounded. Then the next generation. Now we're like 2-3 generations down from now we see activism as just the culture. It's the culture of our people. It's what we do. So now when there's a protest, people just partake.
Right.
Just as you would in a function in the past, like a ceremonial function, you would participate in that because that was part of your culture. Now it's like, whoa, they're protesting. So there's some obligation to be a part of that fight.
Yeah.
Even if that's not something you necessarily believe in, because now it's seen as this is just what we do.
Yeah.
But I started seeing this because I used to teach a class called History of Indians in the U.S. and the where it sparked this idea from tribes in the East, especially the Southeast, where the efforts to be recognized as humans, right? Just to be recognized as humans replace the effort to maintain culture. Because if you still have it, you don't necessarily think like that's not where your mind's at. So then I started seeing that, and I've seen this trend go as colonization went, that effort came along with it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you sorry?
I talk too much.
It's like some of those things you're talking about. Those are like, I wouldn't say it embodies this term, but they're like luxury items. You can only do those if you have these other basic needs met. And if your identity is something that's kind of in the crosshairs, that's going to be something, your people are going to focus on more. So that like during the AIM period, I don't quite understand the wholeness of that thing, but it seemed like identity was a huge part. Culture was getting at a pretty low point, so a lot of effort was put into that activism to maintain that identity and some sort of sovereignty over your own self, I think. So I don't know if that plays into what's going on. I mean, such a long history that we don't have of contact with the outside world. That it's such an interesting thing. And I know we were going to talk about something very specific, but we've been grilling you on who's the Lumbee. What are they? What do they do? Right?
Well, no,
because it's interesting. Because it's
I'm pretty naive to it, and
I am too.
I feel pretty stupid right now because there's this whole segment of Indian country that's just been largely ignored by other Indian people.
Yeah. And that's what really interested me when we started chatting about it. Was these basic questions like, well, what kind of language you got? And well, we don't have none. Well, what do you have left? Nothing. I think when we talked, you said there was like maybe a few words recorded, and I thought, wow, that just blew my mind. So things like identity, like things I think about identity that come from 150 years ago, like the manner of dress, the manner of speaking, a lot of those things are gone, and you don't have a record of what that would look like. So to reclaim that is really to create something new, I guess, in a way, to generate some new identity. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate what you said about sort of just the struggle to be recognized as human.
Yeah.
And that, when I think about Lumbee identity, I think about sort of the centuries long effort that people have made just to be, given basic human rights, including the right to vote, the right to go to school, and to not be enslaved. I've got it. I do have an interesting Lumbee, Montana connection that's not me.
What is it?
You want to hear about it?
I do. We all do.
So I got to preface it with this story about Lumbee people fighting to be recognized as humans. In 1958, the Ku Klux Klan came to our territory and decided that they were going to hold a rally, and that their branding was to, quote, put the Indians in their place. And they rented a field, decided they were going to have their rally in this rented field. And they showed up with 50 guys and a generator, a PA system, and a light bulb on a pole. And so they start up the generator to have their rally, and 500 armed Lumbees and their allies step out of the swamp, completely surround them. Somebody shot out the light, and in the darkness, everything just went crazy. And the Klansmen were completely routed from this field.
Right.
They caught the Klan leader hiding out in the swamps a couple of days later, and he was put on trial and convicted of inciting a riot by a Lumbee judge. In the community. So this was in January of 1958. That year, in September, the judge gets invited to give a speech at the National Congress of American Indians in Missoula.
Oh, really?
And so I've got in the research materials for my work this year a copy of his speech, because it was so popular that NCAI reprinted it as a brochure to circulate to all of the all of the tribes who had attended. And it's really he only mentions the Klan routing in passing. His platform is really all about we need a national Indian voting bloc.
Yeah.
So he was all about voting.
Yeah.
And so he gave this speech, one, calling everybody to like come together and I guess support certain political candidates nationally.
Yeah.
But he also made some comments culturally about like how good it was to be in a community of Native people and to be surrounded by so many elements of traditional cultures. And so like he made this comment in the 50s about how he, as an elder Lumbee person at that time, like really lamented not having those, I guess they were, I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but like perceived markers of Native authenticity. Because at this time, I'm sure like the Hollywood Western stereotype was really powerful in everybody's minds in the U.S. at that time.
Yeah, 1958.
But yeah, he made a remark in his speech that like, you know, he was surrounded by all of this Native culture.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of ironic that he like left this epicenter of Native culture, but it happened to look very different than what he envisioned in his mind as like what Indians are supposed to look like.
Well, the war bonnet, man, the war bonnet will do it.
Yeah. You just throw that on.
I don't care where you go. If someone walks in with a war bonnet, he's an Indian.
Oh yeah,
and you're not.
And did you say, and you're not?
Yeah.
He's going to be much wiser for one.
Yeah, I mean, you're done in.
Naturally, a storyteller.
Oh my gosh!
You can count on some circular thought.
Oh yeah,
and metaphorical speak. Oh yeah.
Turtle Island.
That's really interesting. That time period, 1958. Yeah, that I'm just blown away, man. We got so much to talk about.
I know, dude. You like freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah,
because my whole world is preservation, right? My work as a tribal historic preservation officer, my job is partly, at least legally, to seek the protection and the preservation of culture. Talking to you, though, makes me very thankful for that I have something to protect. Yeah. That like I can say I can go to someone and say, well, what do we call this place? And they'll say it in our language and they'll give us a little narrative. And I take that for granted pretty regularly. Yeah. Like I just pick up the phone. Yeah. The fact that I can pick up call a number of people to get some narrative makes me appreciate things a little more. That it does make my job a lot easier because I can't imagine what someone from your tribe, I think is there a constant justification? Like you're constantly justifying that you guys are Native people, you know?
Oh yeah, there's just I'll be completely honest with you. Like it's sort of it's this thing that's ever present in the room. Yeah. And like you don't know why you feel like you need to do that. And you're like, you know, get behind me, colonizer. But,
well, and then I mean, let's call it like you're probably having to do it to other Native people too. Like
yeah. You
know, just say it, man. This is honesty hour.
It's a safe place.
This is a safe place.
It is. I mean, after we publish it, I don't know about that, but right now it's a safe place.
No, I mean, so that's been on display, and unfortunately, it comes on display every time a bill comes up in Congress to amend the 1956 Lumbee Act, which is that's the federal law that defines who we are in the eyes of the government. And
so you guys are recognized by the federal government, but only under executive order, or is it's a public law or whatever?
It's a public law, and it recognizes us in name only. There's a clause in that law that says Lumbee people don't have access to any resources or acknowledgement because of their status as Native people. I don't remember I can't tell you the exact wording, but it's on one hand, it says you're Indian people. And then right after that, it says you get nothing, and we have no government to government relationship with you.
Oh, damn. Well, I'll tell you what, though, you dodged a bullet on Indian Health Service, though. So,
yeah.
On paper, it seems nice, seems good, but they're just pushing ibuprofen.
Yeah, Dimetap and ibuprofen. Hey, you know what? We got more to talk about. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, we do.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, we do.
And we need to get Ryan back on, and we're gonna wrangle some schedules. He's a busy guy. He's got.
Could you do this again, Ryan?
Yeah,
we didn't.
I would love to do this again.
Okay,
we didn't even get to talk about what I wanted to talk about because you freaking blew my mind. Like, it's weird how something so simple could like freak you out a little bit.
Yeah,
it did kind of freak me out a little bit.
Me too.
Yeah, I'd love to come back and talk to you some more about historic preservation, because that's it's something that interests me, but I don't know enough about it to have a good conversation. I want to know more. So maybe that's not a podcast conversation.
Let's make it one.
Why not?
Yeah, let's make it one.
Why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not? Why don't you start a podcast?
I will.
You do it.
You guys can.
Hey, you should call it. You should call it Lumbee Noise.
Lumbee Noise with 2 E's.
Dude, that'd be cool. Lumbee Noise. Dude, that's cool.
With a Z, though.
Cool. Nah, we don't got it.
Okay.
No, we don't got to do Z. We don't got to do Z. We don't got
to
do Z. We don't got. But wouldn't Lumbee Noise be cool?
I will say that, like, 2 long-term. No, it would be cool. 2 things I want to do. I want to start a podcast, and I also want to try to bring back some of our canoe traditions. We didn't get to talk about that at all, but my interest in historic preservation goes back to people regularly find dugout canoes in our territories that are centuries old, like buried at the bottom of the river for 500 years.
Wow.
We have a game. The Crows have this game, and they call it I can't remember what it's called now, but it's kind of like dice. And they say that this dice game came from like people south of the Smoky Mountains. Isn't that weird? Like that far over?
Yeah.
But our language comes from that area. North Carolina, Smoky Mountains.
That's kind of where you guys migrated from, right?
Yeah, they say that we come from but you're going back quite some time.
Even beyond 1500.
Yeah, man. The migration in 1500 was like,
that was the second or third.
Moorhead, North Dakota, you know what I mean? Like that was like from Devil's Lake, North Dakota is where that happened. And the migration was pretty much all of the Western United States, this side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, So, but there was a previous migration from what we believe to be in and around the Smoky Mountains to the Great Lakes. So, and that's during a time when we call ourselves Agiwarabaga, which means like people on top of the ground. So,
Yeah, we need to chat. We need to chat more, and then let's make it soon if you got time. Maybe next week. I don't know. But there's I don't know if we'll have time.
I don't know. Call me crazy. Call me crazy.
I got some home improvement projects I gotta attend to, but I don't know.
I don't know.
The grass it could be, up.
But I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there.
I gotta go register lumbeenoise.com.
There you go.
Yeah, Lumbee Noise.
Start it up, man. Yeah, we'll guest. I'll be a guest anytime. You let me know.
Call it Lumbee Swamp Talk.
Even better.
Got names for days.
Yeah.
Got names for days.
More dirty.
Figure out where the Z goes in that.
Yeah. We could figure that out. All right. Well, let's call her quits now. We're good. Everybody's good. You feel okay?
Yeah, man. We talked for a long time.
We did. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. We're out then. Thank you for joining us on this episode. And if you want to learn more about what we're up to, go ahead and search Tribal Research Specialists in Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, and check out our other sites. And if you want to contribute to the show, go ahead and look us up on Patreon. We would appreciate your donation.